Hello, everyone, and welcome to KSO Front Row, the Kamloops Symphony's web series that brings you an up-close and gives you an intimate look at what we do here right from your very own home or wherever you may be watching this. My name is Daniel Mills, and I'm the Executive Director of the Kamloops Symphony. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm presently speaking from Kamloops to Secwepemc within the unceded traditional lands of the Secwepemc Nation. I'd also like to acknowledge all of the native lands on which we are gathered across the globe. We are very grateful to be spread out over such a beautiful planet that we call home. Before I introduce the two stars of today's session, I do want to offer a few thank yous. Of course, we want to thank our public funders who have stepped up in a major way to ensure the Kamloops Symphony and arts organizations across the country can continue operating, specifically the BC government through the BC Arts Council and the Government of Canada through the Canada Council for the Arts. As well, thank you to all our donors, sponsors, and volunteers who have continued their support of us during this time. All of you are ensuring that we're here for the long term as we explore new concert formats and alternative programming to suit our current circumstances. Some quick announcements before we get on with the show. Well, we recently announced our next chilling concert experience, The Phantom of the Opera. This unique multi-angle viewing experience will feature the groundbreaking 1925 silent horror film, paired with a dramatic score by Montreal composer Gabriel Thibodeau. Musicians of the Kamloops Symphony will perform the score along with the film, joined by soprano Magdalena Howe, and it will be available online on demand starting October 31st, and will also have film screenings on November 8th here in Kamloops, the Paramount Theatre. Furthermore, we will be hosting a special KSO Front Row for that event right here next Thursday with the composer himself. So Gabrielle will join speaking about the project with Dina. So more details are on our website. Furthermore, our first concert experience of the year, a collaboration with Western Canada Theatre, Igor Stravinsky's The Soldier's Tale, is still available for on-demand viewing until October 25th. So if you haven't checked that out, you still have time. On the fundraising front, as many as you may know, about 2 months ago now, I made the pledge to run every single street in the city of Kamloops. You can see my map here that is quickly getting filled up, but this is a fundraiser for the symphony and keeping us running. And as of today, I have run over 430 kilometers and for over 40 hours, but I still have many big runs left. So I do need some encouragement to help me on my way. So all proceeds, of course, will go helping to ensure that we can keep creating concert experiences and engaging our musicians, keeping them active for you. So more information on that is on our website. So now about today, KSO Front Row. The series you are watching today was created as a way for us to further engage with all of you while we pivot our programming with our current circumstances. So today's session does not feature me, but our music director, Dina Gilbert, and one of our principal players from the orchestra, giving you a closer look at some of our operations and what goes on to make our concerts reality. So today's session is meant to be interactive. So we welcome you to submit your own questions in the live chat feature on YouTube, and we'll try to get to them as we go. We will also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end to answer all your burning questions. So please do that as you watch. If you have a thought that comes up, type it in the box. Thanks again to my colleague Ryan, who's editing this on the go behind the scenes. And although, again, this is we're not the first time doing this, but we've tried to work out as many kinks as we can. But if we do ask for your patience in case technical difficulties do arise. So that's enough for me. So let's get to business, shall we? I'd like to introduce our first guest for today. There is no stranger to all of you, our very own music director, Dina Gilbert. I'd like to welcome Dina to the screen.
Hello, Daniel.
Hi, Dina. How are you?
I'm good. I mean, we've been discussing obviously all day. We have some things coming up, you know.
I know. Yes. Yeah. Well, all those at home, pretty much, Dina and I are in daily communication, especially as we pivot everything going forward. So,
but I have to say that it's exciting to finally be planning things that are coming up really quickly. So yeah. That's positive. That's positive.
Yeah. So nice to see you. All right. And now for our other special guest today. So again, one of our principal players here with the Kamloops Symphony, who just happens to play the best instrument there is, which is the trumpet. And for those of you who don't know, I also play the trumpet. That's why I said that. But Mark D'Angelo has an undergraduate from Brandon University and his master's of music in trumpet performance from McGill University. He is an active freelancer performing regularly with ensembles in British Columbia, including being the second trumpet player with the Vancouver Island Symphony based in Nanaimo. Outside of his orchestral trumpet playing, he has a quite impressive resume, which I believe we'll be hearing a lot about today, so I won't get into the details there, but I don't know spoilers. And Mark has served as our principal trumpet in the Kamloops Symphony since 2013. So please welcome Mark D'Angelo.
Hello.
Hello. How are you today?
Great.
Yeah, I'm lucky now to be with two fabulous trumpet players who also have in common that, as me, I'm living now in Montreal. Both of you also know quite well Montreal since you've been doing your studies in McGill, right?
Yeah, correct. And we both had the same teacher, believe it or not.
Yeah.
But you didn't have the chance to meet, actually, until KSO.
No, I actually graduated, and a couple years before him, a couple months before him, actually. So, we never had the chance to meet, but definitely a fantastic city and a fantastic school to go to. So I was very honored to be able to go there.
And actually, it was funny earlier on when we've been preparing this discussion, Mark, you've been putting me back in my clarinet because you mentioned that at one point, Université de Montréal and McGill University had the combined ensemble of the wind
ensemble, yeah.
That's it. And actually, we've been playing both of them together in this.
At the same time, yeah. We didn't know each other, but yes, I'm pretty sure that it lined up about my second semester. I think it might have been 2003, 2004, somewhere in there. I think we were playing together, so
I was probably at that point really impressed with Alain Caz connecting us, they're connecting students who were sometimes testing their skills with us.
Yeah.
A few years later, then I was starting my master's in connecting. Anyway, small world.
Yeah, very small world. Yeah. Most definitely.
Yeah. So today I'm super excited because, as Daniel mentioned, we have so many things to cover with you, Mark. Of course, the background as a trumpet player, but also you have interesting content since you've been exploring so many different styles of music. Mariachi music. You've been also doing some Indian wedding brass band, and you are doing all these different styles quite frequently. And it brought you to several experiences that are way different than what we just see in the standard world of classical music. So I'm really looking forward to discuss more about this with you. But first, I don't know, Daniel, how you did start trumpet. Was it like your parents who forced you to this, or Mark will have his story? But how about you, Daniel?
It's not about me, but today basically, I really wanted to be in jazz band. That was actually kind of how it started, and my sister really didn't like the saxophone, my older sister, so that was off the table. And trombone, my dad used to play, and I didn't want to copy him. So by default of the wind instruments, trumpet was left, and I thought that was a good idea. So kind of funny that, and now I don't play that much jazz, unfortunately, but that's actually how I started. So yeah.
That's how you started.
But I already had some music.
And Mark, your story was quite touching when I heard it. So what brought you to start with trumpet as an instrument?
Well, it's, I was mentioning, I guess when I was very young, I was lucky to be in a school that had a really good music program. When in kindergarten, we were exposed to Orff and got to play those instruments. And a couple of the teachers would sing songs with us in class at the piano. And a couple of the teachers at school, the grade 1 teacher and the principal specifically were amateur choristers and still sing. Incidentally, they were in the choir when I played Messiah a couple of years ago. So they're still at it, and they loved music and they thought it was really important. And we were lucky to be exposed to that at a young age. And got to about grade 4, and we had an assembly, and my sister was playing. She was a couple years older than me, and she was playing clarinet. And I saw these guys, girls and guys, with trumpets with paper twisted up in the end of their bell. And I thought, what is that instrument? And then when they started playing, these things were blaring loud right in my face. I'm like, wow, that's really cool. I want to do that, right? So the summer came, I bugged my mom. I'm like, please buy me a trumpet, buy me a trumpet. She says, oh, well, why don't we just rent for a little while? I think, see if you like it. I said, no, I want a trumpet. And my mom never usually gave in to any of my whining, but that one time she said, okay, if you stick with it, I'll buy you a trumpet. So
this is my moment where I say thank you so much, Denis. Thanks to you. You're a fabulous musician to the KSO. So thank you, Denis, if you're watching.
I still have that trumpet till about a couple of years back when I finally sold it. Gave it to someone else who could start on trumpet. It's still a good beginner instrument. But I really wanted to play, and then it came time for band, and we had to fill out our lists, and we had our choice, first choice, second choice, third choice, and I picked trumpet number 1. I picked drums, and then I picked saxophone. And we got to the class, and she tried us out on all the instruments, and I buzz on the mouthpiece, and she's like, "Oh no, you got an overbite. You're never going to be able to play well on the trumpet. You should play something else." And I was really upset. She wanted to put me on saxophone, and I really didn't want to play saxophone. And I went home crying to my mom, saying, "Oh, Mom, I want to play trumpet." And she's like, "Okay, fine." And she phoned the school and talked to the band teacher and said, "Look, he really wants to play trumpet." She says, "Oh, well, I already got 4, but okay, I'll allow 1 more, right?" And the rest is history. I wasn't the best trumpet player, but I thought I was. I mean, no, I was
Classic.
That was one of the things I wanted to discuss before Daniel is leaving us, and of course he will be back with us at the end, because there's something about a personality, right, with different instruments. Do you feel, Daniel and Mark, that like the instrument is kind of choosing you with your personality, or?
Of course, most definitely. And I think it has a lot to do where you sit too, right?
Okay, so it's sitting in the back, so you can discuss a little bit more with chat with your colleagues. Is this?
Yeah, exactly. Trumpet player. Like if you see on the back of the bus when we're doing our little outreach concerts and whatnot, usually the brass players are sitting in the back of the bus.
It's true.
Daniel, is this you feel the feeling you have as well?
Yeah, we like watching from afar and knowing what's happening, and there's definitely a personality that for better or worse, there's a stereotype that exists. I can't verify it completely, but it is there.
Yeah.
You're a stereotype for sure. Not everybody the same, but like I would be a terrible trumpet player. Let's say.
Well, clarinet players like to sit in the front generally, and like to follow along attentively and whatnot. But yeah, like also, as a trumpet player, you putting yourself out there every time you play. You're a thin line from making a mistake. So you have to step right in and you have to be confident. Otherwise, it could be certain disaster. So that's a lot of where the personality comes from, I think, because you're going to make mistakes, but you have to just live with them, and you have to be proud of your mistakes.
And having done actually 1 year of horn, and of course, like I didn't have the lips or whatever, like I would have never been an outstanding horn or brass player in any way. But then I had the feeling of how difficult it was, and exactly like you mentioned, you need to go for it. It's not like between you reach, you have it or you don't, and you need to do it. You're right. And actually, now for the next start, we're gonna go will be to discover a little bit about your instrument, Mark, how to produce a sound with the mouthpiece, the parts of the trumpets. You have the different kinds to show us, and also different mutes. So I think now it's gonna be Mark's little lesson to our audience. And please, audience members, if you have any questions, please comment. Or if you just want to say hi from, let's say, Montreal, South Korea, Vancouver, please say hello as well in the comments.
Yeah.
No. I look forward to hearing what you have to say, Mark. I will skedaddle out of the screen and join you at the end.
Okay. See you, Daniel. Okay. Well, I'll show a few basic things of the trumpet here. The trumpet, unlike many of the other instruments, you produce a sound by making a vibration with your lips. With a woodwind instrument, you're vibrating a reed. With a violin or a cello, you're running the bow across a string, which creates a vibration. But on the trumpet, everything happens here. So what we do, we just put our lips together. We say M, and then spitting a sunflower seed. And that's basically how we get the sound started. When we put it into our mouthpiece, the mouthpiece amplifies the sound. You get something like this. As you can see, there are many different notes you can play just by using your lips. The pitches all start here, and the trumpet has its traditions as a signaling instrument many years ago. So the trumpet didn't have valves till the mid-1800s. Before that, you might hear some stuff like this. If you see, I have a bugle here. You probably heard military signals on a bugle. You might hear something like this. So all those pitches are created just for the lips and the natural notes of the overtone series. Later on, in the late, like I said, the late 1800s, the cornet actually, which I have here as well, was the precursor was the first instrument to get pistons, as we know them, which a modern trumpet has. They call it the cornet à piston back in the day. And one of the first pieces written for cornet was a Berlioz Symphonie Fantastique. And the cornet has a little bit more mellow sound. Those of you who tuned in for the stream of L'Histoire de Soldat were able to hear the cornet à piston, which was originally written for. And later on, especially when jazz became popular, artists like Louis Armstrong, for example, switched from the cornet to the trumpet, which adopted the valves as well. So this is kind of the modern trumpet you see before us. And each of these valves, you can see these valves, they have like little ports, little holes. And each of these holes, when you press the valve down, opens up a different length of tubing. So the first valve opens up the first slide here. The second valve opens the second slide here. And the third valve opens the third slide here. If you press all of them together, you get the lowest note. Down the low F sharp, that's the lowest note on the instrument. This slide here and this slide here are almost the same length as this slide here. So that's why you're able to do several notes with different fingerings and get the same effect. So that's kind of how the tones are created on here. And as Dina was mentioning, there are many different sounds that you can get with the trumpet by using mutes and other things like that. So one of the most standard mutes you play probably in school band is probably a straight mute or a sordini. And when you put it in here, it gives a nice crystal clear buzzing sound. All right. Next one we use is often used in pop shows, in a lot of jazz music. We have this cup mute, and this sounds like this. So there's the cup mute. And now you're thinking, oh, I like the cup mute, but I kind of want something that makes it sound like I'm on the radio in the 1940s. That's what we have, a stone line mute. These are often used in like musical theater things and things like that. They're very popular mute. I'll show you this. So that's kind of the what we call solo tone mute. And this mute here, I'm sure you'll all recognize if you're a jazz fan, made famous, well, by many people, but Miles Davis also played this mute a lot. This is called a Harmon mute. So that's kind of got a really buzzy sound, and it's hard to keep the pitch in tune with this mute, but it's very cool sound. And then finally, I have a mute. There are many different quiet mutes and things we use when we're playing in the orchestra, but this is one that's kind of a rare mute. They don't make these anymore. One of the horn players in the Montreal Symphony used to make these by hand. I think he's since passed, but these are called Montreal Mutes, and they were really made famous by all the really quiet sections in some of the French works that were recorded, like Debussy and stuff like that were recorded. So it makes it sound like you're really far away with this mute. So that's kind of my introduction to the mutes and just a general sound on the trumpet. And I hope that's helped explain a few things. We've showed a few different instruments here, but I'll send it back to Dina.
And now, Mark, actually, we've been working on several different videos that you've been doing at home, recording even different parts. So just right now, just before we jump into more conversation, we're going to be watching you actually in one of these videos.
Perfect. Hello, my name is Mark D'Angelo, and I'm principal trumpet with the Kamloops Symphony Orchestra. Today I'm going to be playing a trumpet quartet arrangement of Twilight of the Gods by Richard Wagner. This is an arrangement done by turn-of-the-century trumpet player Albert Mancini, who spent time in positions with the Detroit Symphony and the Los Angeles Philharmonic. I hope you enjoy it.
Awesome. And this was just a teaser. Actually, stay tuned because you're gonna have the full fabulous work of Mark in the upcoming KSO newsletter this week. And Mark, now we've been seeing another instrument from your collection.
Yes.
Can you explain a bit about this one?
Yes, the collection always dangerously gets larger and larger, and I try not to spend too much on horns. Yes, this is a German rotary trumpet, as you can see. It looks very similar to the trumpet, but as you notice, I hold it sideways. And how it works, it has rotor valves similar to what you see on a French horn. And this invention actually predates the invention of the piston valves. So there were two different schools of trumpet playing that developed. There was the Germanic school, like Austria and Germany, and some parts of Eastern Europe that adopted this instrument. And then the cornet was more popular in France. And also in England as well. England and France kind of adopted more of the cornet in that tradition. So they adopted the piston valve. So with orchestras nowadays, when we're playing a Germanic repertoire, we still often use these instruments. And in most of Germany and Austria, they occasionally use our piston instruments, but almost exclusively play on these. And there's a few differences with this instrument. This instrument tends to have a little bit different response. When you play an attack on it, they also fill up with water a lot, as you can see. They tend to have like a little bit more of a tapered response like this, whereas a trumpet is normal piston trumpet is very direct, but this is more a broad sound. So especially for works like Beethoven, where you're blending with a lot of strings, it makes it easier to produce the type of sound you want. And in order to correct some of the intonation issues, there are these things called vents here. They're like giant water keys, and they make certain notes spring out a little bit easier and just correct the tuning and bring them into pitch a little bit easier. So it's a really cool instrument. It's one of my favorite instruments to play, and it's so much different than the way a trumpet is. So they can get really, really bright and loud, or you can play them extremely quiet, way more quiet than it will be easy on a piston trumpet. So that's the German rotary trumpet. This one's made in Spain, incidentally, but yeah, it's a German style.
Excellent. And may I ask, how much can cost a trumpet?
Oh, too much. Yeah. I mean, they're much more than a regular. They're much more than a regular trumpet. Anywhere starting, $5,000 to $15,000, depending on which one you get. They're all made by hand, and they take a lot longer to make. Every single little part is handcrafted, right? So it takes.
And do you have also a lot of different mouthpiece all the time, changing from? There's always different kinds of mindset of musicians who are super good about having the latest, thing. Depending on repertoire. Is this the case for trumpet players as well?
It is, but I'm not really a mouthpiece person so much. I actually play on the same mouthpiece I played in grade 12, and it's a copy of the one I had in grade 12. But yeah, essentially the same one. That being said, I have 2 drawers full of mouthpieces right over here, so that's like I haven't experimented. But for certain instruments, though, you have to switch. Like for the cornet, I have 2 different ones that I need to use just because the shank is smaller. With the German rotary trumpet, you definitely need a different mouthpiece. It's a much more wide open mouthpiece because the bore of the instrument is a little bit different. But for my normal trumpets, B flat, C, E flat, the larger instruments, I all play the same mouthpiece. And for piccolo trumpet, you also use a little bit shallower cup on the mouthpiece, just for survival's sake.
So what is good with this is like if you drop it on the floor, I mean, unless it's dropping on the wrong way and bumping or something, but it's less tricky than reeds that you need to build every week and, you know, redo your instrument every time. It's one advantage of playing brass.
You're right. It is. But when something goes wrong when you're playing the clarinet or the saxophone, you say, "Oh man, I got a lousy reed. I'm just going to get another package."
Oh,
but when something goes wrong with a trumpet player, you're like, "Oh, there's something wrong with me." Right? And that's the difference. So it's hard not when things are not going well to take it personally. You know, it's my lips that are not functioning. So
I never thought about this point, but okay. This is something I've realized this with a singer, obviously, because it's your body, and of course, then your body's the instrument all the time, and that's why as soon as you get sick, this is like really stressful. But it's true though that like we have the excuse of it's a new reed, the temperature is different. It's true that we have that. And
one of the challenges in Kamloops especially is we're up in this really moist and humid Vancouver down here, some of us musicians, and then we travel up to Kamloops in the wintertime to play. And within, you know, even if you use chapstick, my lips will turn bright red within 5 minutes of entering the Kamloops because it's much drier up there. So that's something we have to learn and to work through. But I went to school in Montreal and I went to school in Brandon, Manitoba, and those are two of the coldest places on the planet. So I learned how to deal with that a little bit. I'm a little bit used to it. Yeah.
Yeah. And just before speaking a little bit about how it is to actually process with that kind of video, I just wanted to say a few highs you've got from Boris Ulanovitz, who's saying hi right now. MJ Yoon as well. 555 Records, bravo Mark. And Jeremy Vince is saying, "But baby."
yeah, those are some of my good friends too. Jeremy and Boris, we know. They both regularly play in the orchestra, and incidentally, they both play in the mariachi band, which we'll be discussing a little bit later. And my wife is there, I see, and also Treble 5 Records. I believe that's my friend Malcolm. We're talking about how I got my start with some different styles of music, and I talked about salsa music a little bit, and that's Malcolm. Treble 5 Records Malcolm has a record label and a musician himself, and he was also involved with doing some of that stuff early on with me playing in those groups back in the days. So it's good to have the support.
It's good to have the support of these different and fabulous musicians, or like you say, playing sometimes with the KSO. Now, let's jumping in this the way you're playing in so many different styles of ensembles. I have, for example, I know you're playing in the VJ Brass Band, and the VJ Brass Band is BC's premier Punjabi wedding band. The group is led by Vijay Kumar, who has over 30 years of experience playing weddings in India and Canada. And Vijay has brought together many of the finest and most diverse musicians in Vancouver to play an energetic blend of Bollywood tunes, Punjabi pop, and traditional Indian music. So just having that, I already I really have the feeling we're going to dance a bit. And maybe before we jump in this, we could hear a little bit of how it sounds. We have a little video of you performing.
Okay.
Awesome. My God, I was just dancing. It's
Yeah, it's pretty infectious music.
It
right?
is. And before we mentioned how it's bringing something good to your musicianship, can you explain a little bit the instrument we were seeing in this video?
Yeah, it's a combination of Western instruments and traditional Indian instruments. They've got the dole, which is the drum. It has a high pitch side and a low pitch side, and it's hitting with these like sticks. Believe it or not, they're kind of like curved sticks. The snare drum, which is a common instrument here, and then it's like kind of like a bell tree on a cymbal that are playing like that. And then other than that, it's just a standard like a brass band kind of instrumentation. You have like a couple trumpets. We have a soprano saxophone. We have a euphonium or a bari saxophone. Traditionally, it's they also use clarinets as well, but often the drums are very loud. The soprano sax carries a little bit more than the clarinet. Sometimes the clarinet, if you've only got one clarinet, it can kind of cover it up a little bit. So
Okay.
yeah, especially with all the brass players playing, right? So it's very interesting style, and a lot of it, originated in India, where the British had their marching bands there and the traditional Indian music, and it's just a combination of the two, and became very popular in the Punjab region of India, and a lot of Bollywood movies would use for weddings would use the brass band parading the groom in, and often on horseback or on elephant, and it's real production. So it's very cool. We actually have a horse sometimes that brings the groom in, right?
So are you marching as well, doing, that kind of music were you usually in a setup where in the marching band?
Oh yeah. Usually we're marching, and that usually you play at the house in the morning a little bit, and then you go to the temple, and then you parade into the temple. So it's a real processional music, right? It's very cool to see and experience.
And when is your next gig with this ensemble?
How many hours from now? About 12 hours from now.
That's exciting.
Like that. And yeah, all the gigs are very early in the morning, as you know.
I was surprised actually when you mentioned in the morning. I was okay, wow. So it's regular that like in the morning for these ceremonies.
Yes, and it works very well with the musician's schedule, because often we're playing at night. You end up doing multiple. You don't get much sleep, but you do multiple shows in a day as well. But it's a really fun band to play with, and the people are great, and all these people who play in the band too. The band we have here are from diverse backgrounds, and they all they're either great classical musicians or fantastic jazz musicians. So we really have the sense of improvisation that we're able to use doing these gigs, and someone who will throw in something, and someone will try to mimic what they're throwing in, or often will take opportunities to solo or open up the form and do that kind of thing as well. So it's a very cool thing to be involved with. It's a lot of fun. Yeah.
And what did you learn by doing these different styles, and in which way did it enhance actually your everyday playing in also a more classical format?
Well, all the stuff that I've done, all the world music that I've experienced has definitely impacted the classical music in a positive way. I mean, with the Indian style, some of these forms are very simple melodies, and they're stretched 15 minutes long, and it's really about the groove and really feeling the groove, and it's very interesting that way. As far as how I got my start doing world music, I was in first year university, and I was playing in the big band. And the lead trumpet in the other big band double booked himself, and he got me a gig with the salsa band. And that was the first time I had played that music. And I show up at the rehearsal, and I was really early. Nobody else was there. I'm like getting really nervous. And we get the music, and the music had been photocopied 15 or 20 times and stuffed in wrinkly plastic sheets, and it had been written obviously like with a synthesizer or something. So none of the notes were beamed or anything like that. And I'm reading this, I'm like, I don't know how to read this.
Did you have the thought of like, okay, let's just pretend I'm sick and I leave because
no, I didn't think that. I was just so excited to be there, but I was still terrified. I had no idea how to read this music, and all the rhythm, I was not a good sight reader at that point. That was probably one of my weaknesses at that point. And I get there, and I'm trying to read these things. I've got like 3/16th note rest and 8th note rest, and I'm trying to do all the math. And then I listen to the band and the timbale players, boop, 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 bop, boop, 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 bop, boop, 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 boop. And I'm like, oh, every time he hits that drum, I'm hitting my note, right? So I learned a lot. That different instruments, the congas would always play eighth notes the entire time. So I learned to subdivide, and that helped me so much in my sight reading. Helped me with my rhythm, syncopations, which in classical world, that's like something you don't normally have as much syncopation. So when I run into something like that, it makes it way easier. So that's one of the many ways it's helped me, and also being flexible and being versatile and not worrying about anything, right? That also, it comes from doing a lot of different things like that as well.
I'm now seeing that Mariachi Los Dorados is saying congratulations, Don Marcos.
There it is, yeah.
So I think it's our cue to actually discuss about these fabulous musician, Mariachi Los Dorados. We have some pictures as well with this group that you have. Can you discuss a little bit how you started to join, this ensemble?
It's actually, like any other musical thing. It was actually my friend, the Treble 5 Records fellow that's here, Malcolm. I had just been in town, finished my master's, and I was doing a few small orchestra gigs, but I didn't have a lot of work at the time. And he phoned me up and says, "Hey, do you want to play a wedding on Friday morning?" I said, yeah, sure. I'm game. I'd love to play a wedding. He says, with the mariachi band. I said, I don't play mariachi music. And he says, oh, well, it pays really well. I said, okay, I'm going to go to the library, check out some mariachi CDs and study up. And I just said, oh, why not? Like, I needed the gig, and I love to play anywhere I get an opportunity to play. And I did the gig, and I didn't know any of the songs really. And Alex, the band leader, said, okay, just play really slow in D and play really fast in A. And he gave me just directions like that. And I get to the end of the gig. He said, well, you play very well. I have 4 more gigs this weekend. Do you want to play? And I said, yeah, sure. And now it's been 15 years. And we've been down to the International Mariachi Festival in Guadalajara, 4 times now. We've gone to Alaska. We've gone to Las Vegas, as you saw in one of the photos there. We've been all around the country, Calgary, you name it. We've really had an amazing opportunity to travel the world and play this beautiful music. It's one of my favorite music styles to play and listen to. It's really amazing stuff.
And now, if we would like to know a little bit about mariachi music, maybe we can go back to history a little bit, and also about the few instruments that are used into the mariachi music. You have a few instruments that you're owning. Let's say, for example, you have a Vihuela.
So much like the Indian brass band and like jazz music in America, it really became just a blending of cultures, which created this style. 1519, when Hernan Cortez came to Mexico, there were musicians, Spanish musicians that came, and they brought instruments. And one of the traditional instruments that they brought, it's not exactly like this. This is a Mexican vihuela, but they brought the vihuela, which is the instrument. They also brought the harp, which is a popular instrument. Now, this vihuela, as you see, it's got a rounded back. They used to use a tortoise shell, but I think tortoises are a little bit more scarce nowadays. They don't use that anymore. But this is kind of I'm really bad player, so bear with me. But this kind of creates the percussion sound in the group. As you can see, so there's a lot of hand stopping that's done that really creates the beat that you hear with the mariachi music, and that's the vihuela. They've also got another instrument just came along later. Actually, I'll get to that one in a sec. Before I mention that instrument, it's a pretty cool instrument to see. There's the violins, which we all recognize from the orchestra, another traditional instrument, and this one is the chirimia. This one is actually a indigenous Mayan instrument, and this is not really used in the mariachi band as much, but it's kind of an instrument that predates it. It was used for mainly religious purposes, and these instruments kind of helped to develop that mariachi style. There's traditional songs that are done on these instruments that are still used in mariachi music, and kind of mariachis moved into the religious context and were used like that for a long time and on the farm. And Eventually, during the revolution, a lot of the mariachis would be used as messengers to go town to town to share of what was happening, right? Like a mariachi telegram kind of thing. And so that's kind of how it started. The most famous prolific group was probably Mariachi Vargas de Tecalitlán, and they came around 1898, and by a guy named Gaspar Vargas. And as his son, when the band took over later, really led the group to their heyday. 1920s, he took over and hired a guy in 1928 called Ruben Fuentes, who had actually studied at the conservatory there in Mexico City, violin and composition. And he started really doing more complex and written out orchestral style arrangements for the mariachi band, and it really elevated the music style. And really the heyday of the mariachi band was between the 1940s to the 1960s, when they really hit national television and film, and they call it the golden age of the mariachis. And that's about the same time that they added the trumpet. Now we've talked about all these instruments. I also have to talk about this big one here. This is what we call a guitarrón. And it's round just like the, as you can see, just like the other instrument. I'm not going to play this because this one's just been repaired. The bridge is kind of loose. But this does the bass notes. And traditionally the harp would do the bass notes. But when they started getting on film, to ride horseback and to play the harp is actually really awkward. So the guitarrón was more portable, and you could move it to different places much easier. So this kind of was adopted at that point. And then Miguel Martinez was the first trumpet player with a mariachi group, and he started with a small group in Mexico City. There's still the Garibaldi Plaza there. He started there and eventually moved to Mariachi Vargas, and basically invented the entire vibrato, the style, everything we associate with mariachi music to this day was established by this Miguel Martinez, real master of the instrument. Who probably passed away maybe, I'm trying to think, maybe 15 years ago. He lived a long life, and he was really passing on the knowledge for a long time, but really a fantastic player. If you ever get a chance to hear a group, that's definitely the one to hear. As far as when the mariachis came around, the first written record of the mariachis, originally they thought the word mariachi meant mariage. It was a French word, and they figured when the French were there in the 1860s that's where they got the name of the mariachi band from. But actually, around 1852, there's actually a record written by a priest in the small town of Cocula that talked about the mariachis playing out front of his church all the time. So they think it was actually earlier. It may be the wooden platform that they used to dance on, or it may be a reference, a Nahuatl word for happy time. So that's kind of possible origins. Incidentally, this chirmia I got, and the reason I show this, we had an amazing experience when we were in Guadalajara to go to the town of Cocula and meet all the fabulous people, the musicians, and the mayor took us around and showed us. And the mayor of Cocula said, "You're a trumpet player. You could probably play this instrument." So this is a chirmia that was made there. I think it was bored out with termites and everything, and it was a gift from the mayor of Cocula. So I keep it. I don't play it very well, but I definitely keep it as a little bit of a ornament on my wall, because this is a reminder of that experience first time down there.
Awesome. And now we have also some other videos showcasing your talents in your costume, also singing, because you sing as well in Los Dorados. Yeah. Oh,
yes. This costume is called the traje de charro.
Okay.
And that's the traditional, what it got adopted around the 1930s and 40s. And that's the traditional, what they call the traditional mariachi suit nowadays. Originally, they would wear all white. And this is highly ornamented, and like a rancher who would hire the mariachi band to accompany them would often wear this. But it was a more elegant outfit. They had the best designers in Paris and Milan help design the embroidery for this. So
wow.
Very cool.
That's add to it all. And before we go to see those two videos, could you explain a little bit what is the context and what is the story also behind those two videos?
Well, the first video is the interesting one I picked. It's not really a bombastic. I usually tend to sing the bombastic songs, but this is one I was singing when we were in Guadalajara. And it was a song a friend of mine really loved and told a couple of years earlier when, said I'd love to hear the song. And so I went ahead and learned it. And it's a song that's never rarely played. It's a very, very old song. And we practiced it over and over and over again. And then we never played it for like a year and a half. We'd never touched the song. And it's called Virgencita de Zapopan. And we happened to be in Zapopan playing on this big stage right in front of the Virgencita, which is in that church that's right behind us. And we had one more song. And the song says, "Oh, I must leave Jalisco forever," kind of thing. And that's kind of some of the words. And I thought, wow, this would be a perfect song to finish with. And incidentally, I got extremely sick with food poisoning the night before. And I basically came straight from the hospital to the stage. And right when we're going on, they're like, "Oh, well, Mariachi Vargas, the Tecali clan, who are like our heroes, one of the greatest mariachi bands ever, were playing before us." Not to put any extra pressure on, we're like, "Oh my gosh," right? Like, what an opportunity! But at the same time, we're ready to go on. I can barely make it to the stage, and I see these guys, like, heroes, like coming down, like, "Oh my gosh," they're wishing us luck before we go out. So it was just an amazing experience. Maybe 10, 12,000, 15,000 people in the crowd. It was a really large crowd. And yeah, so this is kind of the experience, and everybody was singing along, and people are crying at the end, bringing little statues of the Virgencita, and it was a just amazing experience where just the moment and the song happened to be absolutely perfectly where art meets life. It's an amazing experience.
And the second video?
The second video is again in Guadalajara. That's I think a year later. It was just a joint group with a group from Michoacan and a group from Colombia, and we were doing a mass band piece. And they asked me to come up and sing at the end. And this is just one of the songs I sing quite a bit with the band, and a lot of fun, to have those things where you're joining all these different people from different places. We play with Slovakian mariachi band as well. We play for all these mariachis from all around the world. It's really cool.
Awesome. So there's really like a big community all around the world.
Oh yeah, it's huge.
For the festival.
Definitely.
Okay, awesome. So then let's have a listen to your those two performances in that next clip. Wow, awesome. So
Yeah.
if we are lucky enough, we might hear at one point a show with you, Mark, having all the different styles, having your one man show.
Maybe.
Maybe we can
Maybe we'll see.
we can have that, pitch that in the universe. We'll see.
Yeah.
We received some questions from Gary Hunt, who would like to know, can you explain and demonstrate how to make rapid succession notes? I think it is called double tongue, thank you, and even triple tongue. So can you explain this technique?
Yes, well, a lot of all our tonguing and articulation on the trumpet, I find the simplest way to teach it and to learn it is through speech, right? So it's like if you ever say like tongue twisters, for example, I like to use tuku, 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 tu for double tonguing. So when I first learned it, I couldn't do it for the longest time. And I would go on my way to school every day. I would just go tuku, 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 tuku. And usually I would only be able to say it 3 or 4 times, tuku, tuku, tu, maybe before I would get tongue tied. And then I just practice it until I could get it solid. So that took, 2-3 weeks, and then I would get it without tongue tied. And then what I do is I just change my voice. So I say the same thing, and just change it into air. So I'm able to do it with air. And then I blow some more air and put my lips together. And then I put the mouthpiece on, and usually it doesn't work the first time. And you do it a couple times, but trying to and try to get it to respond to your tonguing. And then eventually you're able to do what we call multiple tonguing. Tuku, 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 tu. When we get on the instrument, now it's going to sound funny at first because the ku is not strong yet. So we practice it very slowly, and I just try to make the ku very loud. And pressing it very slowly so that it strikes and hits the same spot every time. And then eventually we can get it fast enough. When it starts to sound fast, then the notes get more even. Right, and that's kind of the how we start with double tonguing. Hope that explanation helps a little bit.
Yeah, that was super, and I hope Gary will then try this technique if he's a trumpet player and tell you how it worked out. But I found it was a super great advice, exercise. We have it all to understand this thing. That's fabulous. I was wondering, is there a piece as a trumpet player you would wish, if of course there was no pandemic, no physical distancing on stage, that would make it complicated for us to perform any kind of piece? What would you wish to perform if you could do anything?
Well, I love the impressionistic composers. I love 20th century composers. My favorite composer, one of them, probably have to be Igor Stravinsky. I love Stravinsky and Tchaikovsky. Those are probably two of my favorites, and Debussy as well. And obviously we did L'Histoire de Soldat, which was one I've wanted to do for a long time. That was on a bucket list, and that was exciting to play. But I think Petrushka would probably be the piece I would want to play. A lot of great trumpet lines. I've played every part of the piece, but I've never actually performed it. I've read it in rep classes and done some things with it. But I would love to do that. I'd also really love to do something. I played La Mer before, but I would love to do that piece again, or the Trois Nocturnes as well, by Debussy. So that would be kind of a cool piece. Any of those would be cool. And obviously any of the Tchaikovsky symphonies I love to play again. I've played most of them, I believe, but it would be very, very neat to experience some of that.
I mean, fingers crossed, because everything you're mentioning right now, I'd be excited to perform for sure.
Yeah. And Rite of Spring, one of the most amazing experiences ever in my life. I was in Musikverein in Vienna. I was there for one day. And so I wanted to see the Vienna Phil, and they weren't there. But Pittsburgh Symphony was on tour, and they played a concert at Musikverein where they did Rite of Spring, and it was the most amazing thing I've ever seen. There was like 45 minutes of standing ovations. They just kept playing encores over and over. Wow. People wouldn't leave, and finally they ran out of music and just had to walk off stage. But that's probably the greatest orchestral concert I've ever been to in my life.
Oh,
And
wow.
so I would love to do that.
These experience. Oh, wow. That's fabulous. And just before we wrap this conversation, because time flies so fast, but we've been discovering so many great things with you. Thank you so much. I was wondering, with the pandemic, is there anything that like changed in your way of regulating your day? You've been having a studio home, you've been doing new things, or were you like having the same kind of schedule as before, rehearsing the same kind of amount of time per day and such?
No, it hasn't. It's changed quite a bit, especially at first. The first 3 months of the pandemic, like March, April, May, I was pretty much just locked in my house. Left to get groceries for the most part. And when they announced phase 2, I was able to do a few distance shows of the Mariachis where we go to a park and play from a distance for people and stuff like that. So that's good to be able to get out a little bit more. But all my teaching is online. I have lots of video projects and things I've been doing online. So yeah, most of it's being stuck in my house for the most part. But it takes some getting used to. But the online teaching thing is good. I don't mind it so much. I know other people have issues with it, but I really don't mind it so much. But definitely. You don't get the same connection you might get with a student live, but you're able to manage your time a little bit better as well, because I don't have to travel. I usually travel 45 minutes or an hour each way when I'm going to a student, right, in traffic. So that's one difference where my life's changed, is not driving as much. I'm getting like 2,000 kilometers to the tank of gas, right? So
yeah, you're right. And tomorrow morning, then, just to show an example of your normal day, you're doing a wedding, Indian wedding gig tomorrow morning.
That's correct, yeah.
And then together we'll be presenting the first KSO tuning meeting with some students, with Tracy Clark's students. So they will be able to discover the trumpet and also different excerpts and, of course, the different style of music. So I'm really looking forward for that tomorrow. And I think this is pretty much it. I guess it's time for Daniel to join us back. So we have the closing note of the evening.
Hello, thanks for welcoming me back. Thank you so much, Mark, for everything. It's fascinating. I love watching those videos only because it reminds me, often in our orchestral bubble, we get stuck thinking that classical music is everything. And I think seeing those videos really remind us that there's so much out there in terms of music. And it's like, rejuvenates me and gives us, I think, lots of ideas. So thank you so much for sharing that and for all the time. Just to thank a few other thank yous to wrap up today. Of course, thank you again to all our public funders, sponsors, and donors for their continued support, ensuring that the Kamloops Symphony is remaining active in your community here. And thanks, of course, again to both our panelists, our one and only music director, Dina, Gilbert, and Mark, as I mentioned, for providing so much insight on your digging life outside of the symphony. I think it's fantastic. You made yourself so well versed and have take advantage of all these opportunities you've had, and it's great to hear about that. Thanks again to Ryan, who's been behind the scenes editing this on the go. And of course, thank you to all of you, those watching, and for taking the time to tune in today and for engaging with us in this virtual event. We hope to see you either virtually or in person soon for our upcoming production of the Phantom Opera, as I mentioned earlier. This is taking place at the end of the month on the 31st, and we're actually going to have another KSO Front Row the same time next week on Thursday at 6 p.m. Pacific time with the composer Gabriel Thibodeau and Dina, who will be interviewing him about the project and other film music projects there. So until then, stay safe and healthy, and we look forward to connecting again with all of you soon. Thank you, everyone, and have a great night.